I've clocked up over 250,000 lifetime views on this channel, over 10,000 hours, watch time hours on this channel, giving you my very unpopular opinions. My opinions are very unpopular, and I'll tell you why. Because I tell you the truth, not what you want to hear. So I'm going to continue giving my unpopular opinions, and this is one of the cases where I'm going to give you my very unpopular opinions. The sole purpose or the main catalyst for the Watts case, the reason why we know about it, the reason why it happened was because of Nicole Kessinger. That's it. There is no evidence whatsoever that proves that she was involved in any way, shape, or form. There isn't a shred of evidence to even suggest that NK was involved. Okay? She's never going to be charged. She's never going to be held accountable. She was never a suspect. That is a very unpopular opinion, and I'm giving it to you on a silver platter. NK is never going to be held accountable because she was never a suspect in the first place. I don't believe for one moment, even for a second, that Chris Watts was insane or pushed. I believe Chris Watts found someone else that he wanted to be with, and he wanted to start a new life. He wanted to put an end to the old life, and he wanted a fresh new start. He wanted a do-over. And that was the reason for all of this. If he hadn't met Nicole Kessinger, I am almost certain that everyone would still be alive. Now, maybe I shouldn't give this secret away, but from the moment I start to engage with somebody, anybody in any fashion, I'm working them out in my head. I'm assessing the type of person that they are and whether I like this person or not, whether I want this person in my life or not. Well, there are some people, and I'm going to talk about this, and it might sound like I'm going off topic, but I'm not. Prince, singer Prince, the legend, the Purple Rain singer. When he wanted to discard somebody, when he wanted to discard a woman, what he would do, and I found this out from reading Mai Tai's book, the woman that he was married to and had a baby with. What he would do is he would move her to another house. He would move the woman he no longer wanted to another house and pretend that he was going to move into that house with her. She would be in that other house waiting for him to turn up. And what he would do is he would move his new woman into his current house in the city that he was staying in. And the woman who had been moved into another house didn't know anything about the new woman that he moved in. That's how he discarded his women. He would move one out and move one in. Move one out, move one in. In this case, Chris Watts was moving one out and moving another in. But obviously he didn't do it in that fashion. He did it in an extreme fashion. He was discarding Shanann so that he could start anew with a new woman. He was moving Shanann out of his life, which is what he did ultimately, and he was moving Nicole into his life. Whereas Prince would move the woman he wanted to discard into a new house, and Prince would then move the woman that he wanted into the house he was living, like women were on rotation. Now, I'm going to address some of the theories that AD and Dave and other people have put out there, and some of the theories that my friends have, and whether I disagree with them or not. I'm going to address this first. Dave has said that, and you can correct me on this, Dave, if you want to, that the Colorado Police Department, that they owe Cindy and Ronnie millions in compensation because while Chris was in jail, he wasn't allowed to speak to his parents. And that means that Chris's parents' rights were violated. I don't believe that to be the case at all. If a grown man doesn't want to speak to his parents at any time, but also if he is awaiting time in jail, If a grown man doesn't want to speak to his parents, he doesn't have to. There's no legal requirement that said that Chris Watts had to speak to his parents or confer with them. And if his lawyers thought it was in his best interest not to speak to his parents or anyone else for that matter, then they have the right, as his lawyers who have his best interest at heart, they have the right to make that decision. So Cindy and Ronnie, as much as I empathize with the fact that it was, it wasn't nice for them, it wasn't pleasant for them not to be able to speak to their son while he was in jail. I understand that, but they're not going to get compensation because their son didn't want to speak to them or because their lawyers didn't want Chris to speak to them. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. They're not entitled to anything. And I'm not saying this because I'm not a fan of the Watts. That's not why I'm saying this, but that's just a fact. They're not going to get any money. They're not going to get the phone back if the Colorado Police Department or the Weld County or whatever decides that they want to hang on to that phone forever and ever, then they have every right to do that. They have no right to any compensation whatsoever. So Chris Watts' parents, Cindy and Ronnie, are not going to be compensated for anything to do with this case. That might be an unpopular opinion, and I respect the fact that people do sympathize with Cindy and Ronnie, but they're not gonna be compensated because their son didn't want to speak to them. It doesn't work that way. He was a grown man. He doesn't have to. The second thing I want to address is whether or not Chris was insane at the time it happened. I don't believe that he was insane, because insane people are not conscious of what they're doing. The fact that he drove to his work site where he worked as a field coordinator and tried to bury the bodies or cover the bodies in that manner to cover up his actions shows me that he wasn't insane whatsoever. Now, I don't diagnose people on my channel, but I do give my opinions based on what I know, on what I've seen and what I've heard. I base my opinions on all of those things, on the documentaries, what I've heard. I come to my own conclusions. And you can be insane for a few seconds and then snap out of it, but I don't think he was insane at any point. I believe that this was planned. And in fact, when you see the correspondence between Shanann and Chris leading up to the murder, you see that he's slowly pulling away from her and she is completely confused. And maybe slowly isn't the right word, but you see that he's not engaging with her. She asks him, "Are you in this marriage? Are you staying with me only because we have 3 children? Only because of kids? If you are just staying with me because of kids, I need to know. Please tell me." And he was gaslighting her and he wasn't communicating with her. A real man would have said, "Look, yes, I'm only staying with you because we've got kids." But he didn't. He gaslit her. He avoided communication with her. He gave her the silent treatment, which was psychologically difficult for her to handle because she couldn't understand. She wanted communication and he wasn't giving her any. So I believe, based upon that fact, based upon the fact that, he wasn't being affectionate towards her, and all of these things, she was, giving him books talking about how to love her again or whatever. The fact that he was completely unresponsive to all of these things and refused to communicate with her tells me that he was planning this long before the actual date it happened. I think that this was pre-planned. I don't believe he snapped for 1 second. I don't believe that Shanann walked into that house looking for an argument. She was trying to save her marriage. What's the difference between Chris Watts and Prince? What's the main difference? Chris Watts was broke, didn't have any money. Prince was a multi-millionaire. He was wealthy. He could move one out and move one in. He could rotate women through his houses, through his mansions, because he had the money. He had the means. Chris Watts didn't have the money. He didn't have the means, and he wanted to be with a new woman. But he had no money. All of that big house, those cars, that's all a facade. They didn't have any money. They were cash poor, house rich and cash poor. So he wants to be with a new woman, doesn't have any money. But he has life insurances on the children and on Shanann. Now, this is what I think the second motivation was, money. And people say, oh, he wasn't interested in money. Everyone is interested in money. He might not have been interested in money like Shanann was. He might not have been interested in money to get a Gucci bag or Chanel perfume. But I bet you with a new woman, he would have been interested in collecting some life insurance money, especially if he didn't have any. So that was the second motivation, money. If he gets rid of Shanann, she's no longer alive. The kids are no longer alive. He gets life insurance money to start a new life with a new woman. That was the second motive. No, he didn't want money so that he could buy bling bling. He wasn't a bling bling person, I agree. It doesn't appear to be that he was a bling bling person. But everyone needs money to survive, and that's why everyone cares about money. It's always about money. I agree with Scott Reich on that one. It's always about money. And when you have an affair, you have secrets, you have financial problems, all of those things are catalysts for what happened.